Okay, guys, so today we are going to finally start modeling for real in this class. And we're going to learn the Editable Poly modifier, which is probably the most sophisticated modifier inside of 3ds Max as far as modeling is concerned. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife modifier for any poly object. So just first I'm going to kind of do an 80,000 feet overpass here, show you how this works, and then we'll slow it down and let you guys follow along. If you can keep up with this, cool. If not, I'm going to come back to it and do it again, so don't worry. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a standard primitive box. And I'm going to hold down my control key to make the base square. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of height here. And then I'm going to right click to get out of box creation mode. All right, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to maximize my perspective viewport. And when we get into poly modeling, usually the first thing I do is I hit F4 for edged faces so that we can see our edges on our shaded object. And then I hit the J key to get rid of that bounding box that kind of shows up there. And then the next thing I tend to do is turn off the realistic shading. That's the shading that casts shadows and kind of becomes annoying after a while once your model gets a little bit involved. And I just change that over to shaded, and that just keeps those annoying shadows from mucking up your work. All right, so now that I got the stage laid here and I got everything looking the way I want, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my box that I just created, and I want to modify the box. So I'm going to go to the Modify tab, which again is the little thing that looks like a noodle here. And I'm going to click that to expand it. Currently, my box still has its construction history on it. So in the modifier stack, it's named box, and I still have construction parameters here. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm just going to go ahead and add some extra edges here. So in length, I'm going to add 3, and in width, I'm going to add 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now what I need to do in order to be able to modify this object at the sub-object level is I have to actually convert it to an editable poly. And watch what that does here. Currently I have my box node in the history, and it's got all the history intact. When I right-click on this object and I say convert to editable poly, look what happens. The box node completely got disintegrated, and now all that's left is this editable poly. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you've created a standard primitive and you want to have access to its original construction parameters, you have to edit those before you convert it to an editable poly. So when I add an editable poly to it, or convert it to an editable poly, it blows away all the original construction history. Okay? So now that I have an editable poly, let's just take a look at it. So this is the top of the hierarchy, the name right there, editable poly. And then it's got a bunch of sub-objects below it. And in order to see those, I have to click on the plus key here to expand it. And then we have the hierarchy. So top of the chain, the king is editable poly. And then we have the subordinates, which are vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. Now notice what happens as I cycle through those. Look at these little icons down here below. So when I click on vertex, this icon lights up. When I click on edge, this icon lights up. Border, this icon. Polygon, this icon. Element, this icon. So you can cycle through the sub-objects by clicking on the text-based menu here in the modifier stack, or you can also do it in the GUI by clicking on the graphical user interface icon. All right. So either way will put you in those various modes. All right. So a vertex is very simply a point in space. All right. So a vertex in three-dimensional space has how many coordinates? 3. So 3 coordinates define where this point is in this space. And then what I need in order to create a polygon is, first I need edges. So it starts with the building blocks are vertices. Then between 2 vertices gets drawn an edge. So that's an edge between 2 vertices. And then I can have a polygon when I have a minimum of 3 vertices. So you need 3 vertices, and if you have 3 edges, I don't have any 3-sided faces in here, so you can't see one. These are all four-sided, so 1, 2, 3, 4 vertices. But if I had at a minimum, you have to have a three-sided face in order to have a polygon. So if you don't have three vertices, you can't have a polygon. So it goes vertex is the fundamental building block. Then edge, this is an edge. Click on the edges. And then I'm going to skip over border because we're going to show that here in a little bit. And go straight to polygon. And then we can select the polygons. And the polygons are basically just a bunch of vertices that are strewn together with edges. And then the polygon is like the surface. So think of the vertex is kind of the lattice. The vertex is actually the glue that holds the lattice together. The edges are the lattice, and then the polygons are the surface that gets tarped over the lattice to create the solid object. Okay, so that's the sub-objects and how they're created and their names. Let's see what we can do with them. So we can manipulate sub-objects with the Editable Poly just like we can regular old objects. So I'm going to start with vertices, and I'm just going to go ahead and select some vertices here in the center of my object, and I'm going to hit the W key for move, and check it out. We can move those guys. I'm going to hit E for rotate. We can rotate them. I'm going to hit R for scale. We can scale them. So we can basically do all the regular transforms that we normally do with the object level that we've been doing thus far. We can do it now at a sub-object level. And it's not a big leap. If you see me pulling these points around, you can see here that basically if you can organize these points into any shape, then you've essentially built that shape, right? And that's really all that modeling is, okay? It's just a bunch of different strategies for how to organize points and make them look like something. That's all we're doing, okay? So that's the vertex level. So again, vertices you can move, rotate, and scale. I'm going to undo that operation, and I'm going to grab some edges. So I'm going to grab those same four edges here. And I just want to demonstrate that we can also W for move. We can move it. E for rotate. We can rotate it. And R for scale. We can scale it. So basically, even though I'm kind of doing the same thing here, sometimes it's going to be advantageous to grab edges and move them, and sometimes it's going to be advantageous to grab points and move them, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. All right. So now at this point, I can also show you what a border edge is. So I'm going to do that really quick, rather than jumping over to polygon. I'm going to go ahead and first go to polygon mode, and I'm just going to do this really quick. I'm going to select this polygon right here, and I'm going to delete it. And once I do that, now I have kind of an open hole in my object. So before it was kind of like watertight, it was completely closed. Now I have a hole in the object, and that's what the border is. So whenever you have a hole in your object, you use the border to select the hole, the open hole. All right. So I'm going to undo that. I just wanted to show you what a border was before I leapt over. So I'm going to undo that operation, and now I'm going to leap over into polygons. And I'm going to select this polygon, and I'm just going to move it. So again, we can move the polygon, we can rotate the polygon, and we can scale the polygon. All right. So it's kind of like allowing us to manipulate the object, but at the sub-object level, so we can start making kind of interior shapes or using our primitive shapes to build more complicated shapes, which is what we're going to do today. All right, and then the final thing we have here is an element. And the element is basically just this whole thing, all right? So the way it works is if I had multiple objects like this within the same object, and I can do that, if I hit the W key for move and I hold down the shift key, I can clone that element, and I can say clone to element. And what this is this object now is a poly object that is not tied together, so none of these vertices are welded. So each one of these is a separate element. So a poly object that has two separate entities that are not welded together or co-joined by vertices has separate elements. So that's what an element is. So I'm going to undo that operation. And then I think I ran out of undos, so I'm glad I did because I want to show you guys this. Here at school, our preferences for Macs get reset every time we log in and log out. So it can be useful to, the first thing you do when you sit down in the chair, if you just get in the habit of it, I'm going to delete this, is go into the Customize under the drop-down menus. And under Preferences, the first thing I always do, mine's still set because I didn't log out from the last lecture. The default is 20 undos. That's really not many at all. That's kind of nothing. What I usually do is any software that I log onto that has undos, I just type 999 and then hit enter. When you do that, Max is going to tell me, no, the max we do is 500. Fine, I don't care. And then I just say okay. All right, so now I have 500 undos, which is where we want to be so that we can make mistakes and get away with it. All right, so let's do this again. I'm going to go ahead and create that same object. So this time, let's go ahead and do it all together. So I'm going to create standard primitive. I'm going to do the box. I'm going to hold down the control key here to make it square. And just give it a little bit of depth. And it remembered my settings from last time. So it went ahead and it gave me 3 edges on each dimension here. And if you don't have that straight out the door, I'll just go ahead and do it again. So if you had it set to default, it started out with 1 and 1. I'm going to change this to 3 and 3. And then now that I have that, I want to go ahead and convert this guy to an editable poly. And I want you to watch out for something when you do this. Look what happens when I go to convert to editable poly. Right above there, there's one that's called editable mesh. So there's 2 different modifiers here that kind of work similar but also very different. And I just want to point out that they look the same when you do it. So this time I did editable poly, but watch what happens if I do an editable mesh. It kind of looks identical. So in terms of just what the interface looks like from a graphics standpoint. So the only way you would know that is if it says editable mesh. So when you guys are converting, just make sure, because it's very common for people to accidentally hit editable mesh and think that they're in an editable poly because it looks the same, but in fact it's not. They have very different menu items. So if ever you're looking for a menu item that you think should be there and it's not, just double check here, read this, and make sure that says editable poly rather than editable mesh. Okay? So we know now that we're in an editable poly. That's what we want to be in. And I want to go into Vertex Mode. And what I want to do is I want to turn this object that looks very simple here, I want to turn it into a chair. And in order to do that, the chair needs legs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to organize these vertices. I'm going to do it in the top orthographic viewport so that basically these vertices stretch out and push up into the corners, and then they're going to create the basis for table legs or chair legs. We'll start by doing a table, I guess. So I'm going to just scale these up, and then I'm going to select the vertical row here, and I'm going to scale these out to the edge, like so. And so what I've done here is I've just pushed the verts to the edges so that now if I go into polygon mode, so I'm in vertex mode, but now if I go over to polygon mode and I click, I actually have these polygons isolated that kind of make chair legs. You can almost imagine that if I can just grab these and push them out, then I'll actually make a table out of this, except for I need to do it from the bottom. So I'm going to go around here to the bottom and do it. All right, now the way we're going to do that, I'm going to maximize my viewport here. And I'm going to turn off my grid because it's getting in my way. The way we're going to do that is through some of the tools that are under the Editable Poly modifier. So another thing you may want to do is this tool setting over here is kind of nested, and it's a little disgusting how you have to scroll through this entire stack, and it becomes hard to kind of orient yourself and remember where your tools are. And there are a ton of tools under the Editable Poly modifier. So the first thing, if I'm working in Editable Poly, is I always just grab this and pull this out. And this is so much easier to navigate now that I can see all the available options rather than actually having to scroll through this list here on the side all the time. So you might want to get in the habit of that. It'll just simplify your life if you just pull that out so you can see what you're doing. Okay, so I'm in polygon mode. I've selected the bottom polygons at the base of this box. And now I just want to pull these out to make legs for my chair or my table. All right? And the way we're going to do that is under the polygon menu set with these selected, we can just click on this item right here under Edit Polygons called Extrude. If I click that, watch what happens. When I hover over one of these polys, my cursor changes from an arrow into this thing that kind of looks like a crosshair. When it does that, what it's telling me to do is I can click and drag, and I can extrude out those polygon faces from my object. All right? And now I've got a crappy little IKEA table, right? Cool, right? Okay. Now if I want to make this into a chair, what more do I need to do? Just grab these, right? Pull those up. I could grab them and pull them up again. I could grab them and pull them up again. Then I could go ahead and grab these guys and extrude these together. And now I got a chair back, right? So this is essentially polygon modeling at its simplest level, right? So this is kind of like the Minecraft chair or the Sims type of geometry that we may have seen. Definitely this is not a next-gen model by any stretch of any sort of imagination. All right. So let's go ahead and do that again in case you guys didn't follow along. And I always like to do things again, but I'm going to show it to you in a slightly different way. Okay, so I grabbed these polygons and I extruded them down. This time I want to do it a little different. Instead of just grabbing and dragging, I want to go ahead and open up the settings dialog. So if you'll notice that a lot of these tools under the edit polygons, they have the extrude, but then right to the right of it, they also have the little settings box. If it has a settings box, that means it's going to give you some other options that are otherwise unavailable to you if you just use the button itself. So what I like to do under these is I'll almost always use the settings, and I'll show you why here. So I'm going to click on extrude again, and I'm going to open up the settings. And watch what happens when I do that. So this time I did it through the settings, and we get this little window. It's called a floater. And see how it'll just kind of float around in that window, and I can move it wherever I want. So if it came up in my way, I could just grab it and move it off to the side. And what this little floater allows me to do is it allows me to adjust my extrude with precision. So I can grab that extrude and I can type in a value. So if I wanted to extrude it exactly 10 units, I can do that. If I wanted to do 20, I just type in 20. And it also allows me to click and drag from the side, which is kind of cool. The added bonus of this is that if I don't like what I did, all I have to do is click on this little X arrow here, and it cancels the maneuver. So what it does is it kind of allows me to preview my modification before I commit the changes. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again. And this time, if I want to repeat something, so if I do 10, and then I hit enter, and I want to repeat the function, all I have to do is click on the plus key, and look, it'll keep repeating it also, which is kind of cool. Now the downside to that is that it actually extruded those several times, and if I went ahead and said stop, it won't actually undo those because each one of those were committed. So you want to watch that. But if you only do it once, so if I go to extrude and I do it once and then I say stop, then it'll get rid of it. And if I do it again here and I say okay, then it'll commit the changes and I'm done. All right. You can also scale those down after you extrude them. So if you wanted to make it broader or you wanted to taper your, at this point they're table legs, so we'll do a table. You can do that. It's kind of neat. Okay, so that's the extrusion. Let's go ahead and make a chair with this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pull these guys down, and then I'm going to extrude them one more time. I'm going to use the precision here, so I'm going to say OK. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to push the green arrow to accept the changes. Now I'm just going to go into Vertex Mode, and I'm going to select these vertices, and I want to make my chair legs a little bit longer, like so. Maybe not quite that long. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into Polygon Mode here. And I'm going to make my back of my chair, so I'm going to say extrude. This time I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to say okay. I would normally say okay, but I'm going to go ahead and do this 2 more times. Say okay, because what I want to do is I want to add a back to my chair. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these guys down a little bit. And then now I can go into polygon mode here, and I can extrude this one more time. And I'm going to pull these back a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and accept the changes. Now you might be saying, why did you do that? Why did you leave that gap between? And the reason for it is because I want to sew these vertices together here. I don't want to. I don't want to just run them together. That wouldn't be quite right technically for the back of this chair. So what I want to do here is I want to delete these edges, because remember what I said previously about how you can't weld vertices together unless you have open edges, right? So now what I want to do here is I actually want to weld these vertices together so that I'm going to finish this back off. So I'm going to go into Vertex Mode, and I'm going to select all these vertices, and I'm going to weld them. I want to show you a couple different ways you can weld verts together. The first is the one you're familiar with, is the weld threshold that we've already used for the line tool. And again, I'm going to do this with the settings because I'll get my floater here, and it's going to allow me to tweak my settings without actually committing them. And see how easy this is? I can just find the threshold. When I find that threshold, all my verts are going to snap together. Once they're snapped together, I can say OK to accept the changes. And there we go. Now my seat back is stuck together. But I have a slight uncleanliness here, and then I have an extra loop of edges that goes around the back, which maybe I don't want now because I have this thing completely filled in. So I want to show you how to get rid of that cleanly. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go into Edge Mode, and I'm going to select all these edges. I'm going to hit Q key because I don't want to unintentionally move my object. And I want to show you, you can select an edge, and then see how this edge loops cleanly around. If I select just one edge and I click on this little button here, loop, see how it'll loop all the way around? And then I can delete those. But I want to show you another way to do it. If I click and select one of them and then I shift click, hold down the shift key, and double click another one, it will also loop around automatically. So you can either hit the loop button or you can select one, hold down the shift key, double click, and it'll loop and select the remaining guys. Now once I have those selected, it would be tempting to just go ahead and hit the delete key, right? But watch what happens when I do that. It deletes the entire section, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to undo that, and I want to show you a little tool in Max that's very useful, and it's called a clean delete. What a clean delete does is it will actually delete the edges and the vertices for you, but it will leave your polygon intact so that it won't actually delete the polygons that are tied to those verts and edges. It's kind of your way of saying, I want to delete these, but I want you to leave the polygons that are associated with it behind. And the way you do that is you hold down the Control key, and then you hit the backspace key after you have your edges selected or your verts, whatever it is you're trying to delete. And then it'll delete those elements, but keep the remaining geometry. And so there we go. We have built our first object, which is a chair. So I want to show you another way for you to weld vertices together. And let's go ahead and do that through the Extrude tool again. So I'm going to grab this little rung here. I'm just going to build some supports here for my chair legs. And so I'm going to go to the Extrude tool, and I'm going to leave it right there and just say OK. Because I have to, if I want to merge these vertices with these verts, I have to have two border edges. So now that they're open, I want to show you another way to merge verts. This one is right below in the Vertex sub-objects under the Edit Vertices tool, right below the weld, which we just used with the threshold, we have access to the target weld. What target weld allows us to do is select a vertex anywhere and then drag it to another vertex that we want to move it and weld it to. And when I do that, watch what happens. It moves and welds it to that vertex, and I can just kind of manually go all the way around and select those and weld them until I get it the way I want. So that's another way. Another way to do this exact same operation without welding vertices is I can go into the polygon tools, and I'm going to select these two guys, and I'm going to delete that. And what I have here is two open border edges. So I can go to border mode and select these two open borders, and I can click on bridge, and look what happens. Does the exact same thing. All right. We'll get into bridge a little bit more, but those are all ways for you to connect polygons using the various different tools, from weld to bridge. So what I want you guys to do is go ahead and build this chair. Very simple object, and I'm going to come around and see if you have any questions. Okay, so we built the chair here. Everyone did pretty good, and that's awesome. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to start over because I want to show you some new stuff. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to turn on my grid so I can see where my creation plane is. Hit the Z key to frame it all up. Excuse me, and then I'm going to go to Create, Standard Primitives. I'm going to do a box again. I'm going to hold down my Control key, and let's say that I made this thing, and I'm going to go into the Modify tab, and I'm going to take out those extra edges that I put in. And let's say that I create my box, and then I forgot to add the extra edges, which some of you guys did, and you just went straight to Convert to Editable Poly. And then, lo and behold, you forgot to add your edges, and you don't want to go back and create another box, but you want to use this object to make your chair. Don't fret, you can do it. So the way that works is I'm going to take my box here, and what I need to do is I need to add an extra 2 edges in each axis here. And I'm going to do that by going into Edge Mode, so Editable Poly, Edge Mode. I'm going to select one of these edges. Remember, I can select the ring around here by either selecting a single edge and clicking on Ring, which will ring it all the way around. Turn off my grid so you can see that. Or I can select a single edge, hold down the Shift key, and then double-click an edge right next to it, and it will also ring. So either way, the keyboard shortcut's just a lot faster. In any case, you always want to check after you click the ring and just make sure that you actually did select all the edges all the way around. Sometimes what happens is you just get a partial selection of edges, and you wouldn't know it unless you actually orbit all the way around. So again, I'm going to select my edge, double-click with the Shift held down, and now I select my ring. I check. It's all selected. All right, so now I want to just add some extra edges in here. The way you do that is by using the Connect tool here under the Edit Edges. So like I said, if ever there is a settings dialog to the right of one of these tools, I typically use it. So to the right of Connect, we have a settings dialog, so I'm going to click on the settings dialog. And sure enough, I open it up, and it's inserted a single edge here. I want to insert 2 edges, so I'm going to dial that up to 2. This allows you to space them out if you wanted to. You could also shift them left or right if you wanted to. In this case, I don't want to do either of those things, so I'm going to 0 those out. And I just want 2 edges, and I'm going to say OK to commit. And then I'm going to select these edges laterally here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key to double. Again, just to show you one more time. Or I could select a single edge and say ring, either way. Check it. Okay, now I want to add 2 edges lengthwise, so I'm going to go into my Connect tool. And it was already set up on my floater to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and say OK to commit the changes. And now I essentially have the equivalent of where I was before. I just did it a different way. So you can always add extra edges to your poly objects by selecting the ring and then connecting them. All right. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and build this guy again fast. So I'm going to select that center row by marquee dragging in the top ortho. And I'm going to scale it up, pushing these to the corner. Then I'm going to marquee drag in the center. I'm going to scale these up in X to push those to the corner. Now I got my table legs set up. I'm going to go into polygon mode here, select them all, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude them. Change it a little bit, say OK. I'm going to do a plus, and then accept. And what that did was that gave me my rungs there automatically built in. And then I'm just going to push these up a little bit. So I went into vertex mode. I'm going to pull those up. And then I'm going to go into polygon mode here and extrude the back again. So I'm going to say extrude. I'm going to hit the plus key a couple times, accept that. And then what I'm doing this time is I'm just kind of editing this in post. So I wasn't paying too much attention to what I did because I knew that I was going to pull the verts anyway. And then I'm going to go into polygon mode here, and I'm going to delete. Some of you guys were trying to merge vertices when you didn't have an open border, and you saw how well that worked. It didn't. So what we're going to do here is I've opened up that hole. Now that I have a hole, probably the easiest way for me to combine these two is to just select them both and say bridge, and I can go ahead and bridge that gap. Pretty cool. All right, and now I want to do this on the bottom on the rungs again, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to open up these border holes here, and I just want to show you that the bridge not only works on the hole where it'll bridge them all together, but you can also bridge individually 2 edges at a time. So I'm going to go to edge mode here, and I'm just going to select my 2 edges here. So shift click to select multiples, or is it control? I always forget. Control to select multiples, and then I'm going to go into bridge here. And if I click on that, look what happens. It just bridges those single 2 edges rather than the whole thing. So you might say, what is that useful for? And my answer right now would be, you'll see by the end of the class. But it is possible to just bridge 1 edge at a time. And so I could just go through here and select one of these guys, bridge, and I just want to work my way around. And I think I selected the wrong edge, so there we go. Bridge, and then finally I'll grab this one and bridge. Okay. All right, so this is like an extremely rudimentary chair, correct? And I mean, if you're building chairs like this, chances are you're just starting out in 3D graphics because no one's going to hire you to build this chair, right? And because it only took us 2 seconds. So now I want to show you, let's take this chair and start adding some more detail to it, all right? So I want to show you another tool that's available to you under the polygon menu set. And this one is called Bevel. So let's say I wanted to take this chair seat here, and I just wanted to add a little decorative nest to it. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to grab the Bevel tool. It's got settings. All that Bevel does is it essentially extrudes your object and then gives you the ability to taper it. So it's just like an extrude where if you extrude it and then scale that polygon, and then they just call it a different tool. So it's a bevel. So I'm just going to inset that seat a little bit. Maybe I don't want to taper it that much. And I'm going to say OK. And then I'm just going to go ahead and bevel it one more time. And this time, instead of going down, I'm going to go up. And that looks fine. And so very quickly, I've created some interest in my object and created a nice little decorative element. If I wanted to finish off the tops of these, the rungs on the back here, I could go ahead and also do a bevel on those guys. Right now they kind of come to a point. We could do a fancy kind of like Gothic type look, or we could taper these down to a point. Doesn't matter. Knock yourself out. Turn them into spikes, whatever you want to do. All right? So that is the bevel tool. But let's say I just want to keep this kind of conservative, so I'm just going to bevel this up and do something normal. And let's say I wanted to make this chair a little bit more comfortable, right? Maybe I like my guests and I want them to actually be comfortable. So I want to basically add a little bend to this chair here. And how does anyone think I might do that? Anyone have any idea? Would I perhaps go into edge mode? And then once I was in edge mode, would I select one of these edges and then say ring? And then once I had that run, would I perhaps go to connect mode and then add, say, 5 edges and then say OK? You guys are all geniuses because that's how you do it. All right. So now that I have this thing done, I'm going to go ahead and go into vertex mode. And now that I have some extra edges, I can actually add some shape, right? Because when it comes to 3D modeling, you can't add shape without edges, period. That's just it. That's the rule, all right? And you've already heard me say how many edges do I need for 1 to 90 degrees of arc? 3, right? So that's kind of the mantra when you're building stuff. When you're trying to accomplish detail somewhere, and it has any kind of arc, anything over a 0 degree of arc, you're going to need 3 edges to do it. So in this case, we have the back of a chair, and the arc on this back of the chair is actually, because it's going to come to a curve, is actually over 90 degrees of arc. It's almost like 180 degrees of arc, because I'm going to make it into kind of a half a circle, essentially. So what I'm going to do here is I just selected all of the verts simultaneously, and I'm just going to pull them back a little bit, like so. And then I'm just going to deselect by holding down the Alt key to deselect the ones on the edges, and I'm just going to pull it back a little more. And then I'm going to hold down my Alt key again and deselect the verts on the edges, and I'm just going to pull it back a little more. And before I know it, I've got a nice little arc chair, and if I wanted to then kind of pull the whole thing back a little bit, give it a lean back, I could do that. I could rotate all the verts, and there we go. We've got a lot more comfortable looking chair. You know, I might sit in that chair for a little bit longer than a half a minute compared to the other McDonald's chair. All right, so that's basically that process. So now I want to do that again. All right, so, and I want to show you maybe a little bit easier way to even do that. So what we did was we selected the edges. So if I undo all my operations, I'm just going to go back to square one. So all we did was we selected one of the edges. We did a ring of the selection. So I can do that either by clicking on a single edge and saying ring, or I can do that by clicking on an edge and shift, holding down shift and double clicking to select a ring. Once I did that, then I went ahead and went in and connected. So I opened up the connect, and all the connect was doing is it allows us to add edges so that we can add more detail. I added 5 because if you ever want an edge to be straight down the middle, you always want it to be an odd number that ensures that there's going to be 1 down the middle. If I do an even number, well, look what happens. I end up with 2 in the middle, so that's why I did 5. And I'm going to say OK. And then I went ahead and I brute forced this. I just pulled the points. All right, I want to show you now a slightly more elegant way to do this. So in order to do this in a little bit more elegant manner, I'm going to go into vertex mode. And then I'm just going to select only these verts right down the center of the back of the chair instead. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in here in my edit polygon settings, so right above, or edit vertices settings. Right above edit vertices, we have this tab here, which says soft selection, and it's got a little plus key. What does that plus key mean?
There's another menu underneath.
Yeah, there's something hidden there, and I can expand it and see it. So I'm going to do that. What are they hiding from me? Right? So I'm going to click that open, and now we see we have this soft selection tab, and we've got all this kind of weird crap that we've never seen before. And I want to show you how this works. So in order to enable soft selection, I first have to turn it on. And I turn it on by clicking on this little toggle here for use soft selection. Once I click that, you can see here that our vertices kind of change into this like rainbow color. And you might be saying, what's going on there? And that's how the soft selection works. So if I want to turn off soft selection, I said this was a toggle, so how do I turn it off? I click it again, and it's off. All right, so I'm going to click it back on, and now we have this kind of like rainbow looking selection. The way this works is I only have these center verts selected. The rest of these are not selected at all, but yet they show up in kind of this, it goes from hot red colors to warm orangish to cooler green to cold blue. So the way this works is that when I pull these vertices or manipulate these vertices in any way, these different gradations of colors from hot to cold are just telling me that they're gonna be influenced to a certain degree by the manipulation that I do on the vertices that are selected, which are the ones that are red. All right. So the way it boils down is it's kind of just a fall off. So if I go ahead and pull these, watch what happens. So all I'm doing is pulling those two verts, and look, kind of perfectly, the other verts are following along, right? Do you notice anything, any similarity between this shape that I just made here and this shape here? They're pretty much identical, aren't they? All right, we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. So the first thing I also want to talk about before we get into depth on the soft selection is the fall off. So over here, right below the Effect Back-Facing button, we have a fall off. And the fall off is just how close or how far from the actual selected objects the rest of the objects are affected. So in this case, it kind of started out perfectly, and it went right to the boundary of the back of my chair, which was perfect. But if I wanted it to go farther, I could dial it up and see how the rest of those verts are changing. And then watch what happens if I move it. All of those verts are going to fall off and kind of follow along. So what you kind of want to do is you only want the influence to go where you want it to go. So in this case, I'm going to dial the fall off back down. And so it just touches those last verts on the back of my chair, and that's it. All right, now that I have that, now let's talk about this guy. So we saw that this shape here basically was made identically to here. So that tells me that if I can edit this shape here to be a different shape, then that's essentially what's going to happen when I pull that point. So see that? So you essentially are like drawing with this. So if you want the back to be kind of angular like this with a point in the center, you can do that. You can adjust the pinch here. I could put a crease in there. I could turn it into a McDonald's logo. If there were enough edges, it would do it. I just have enough that it's barely showing that.
It's really hurt your guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's if you don't like your guess, right? This is the kind of chair that Martha Stewart has at her house. She doesn't like you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So I just want you to be aware that whatever shape you draw here, that's what it's going to do. So this can come in handy for many different things. If this were a pillow and you wanted to create a little button there, a divot for your button, that would completely work for that, right? In this case, it does not work, so I'm going to go ahead and take that down. Yeah, that's the pinch value. Normally, you're going to want to leave that alone, so I'm going to leave that alone. And in this case, I just wanted a nice sloping back, so I'm going to do that, and boom, done. Always turn off your soft selection because it does stay live. So if I went ahead and started moving on and I started pulling verts, look what's going to happen. They're going to follow along. Soft select is kind of like a node state. It's a toggle, so I'll just turn it off. All right. So that's the soft select. Let's go ahead and do something else with it. So this seat here that I gave this chair is not very realistic. In fact, I've never seen a chair that looks like that in my entire life. All right. I just did it because I thought it looked cool. But now I changed my mind. I think it sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I'm just going to select all these faces or polygons. You'll hear me call them faces. That's because that's what Maya calls them. In Max, they're polygons. So maybe just make a mental note that faces and polygons are the same thing. Every software either uses face or polygon to describe that piece of geometry. So I'm going to select my base here, my seat that I no longer like, and I want to show you how quickly and easy it is to edit something that you made from a polygon. Select all those polygons, hit the delete key, done, they're gone. All right, now I want to fill that hole. I go to border mode, I select the hole, I go over here under, I'm going to hide the soft select for now, under the edit borders, cap, done, filled in. I could also cap that hole by going into edge mode and selecting these two edges and saying bridge. It would do the same thing. But in this case, the cap was the easiest, so that's what I did. I selected it, say cap, the hole is capped. All right, now let's say that I really like my guests, and I want them to be even more comfortable than they currently are with this nice slope back. and I actually want to give them kind of that routered seat indentation that you've probably seen on all the grade school chairs that are in the entire United States. All right, so let's go ahead and add that detail. I'm going to do that by going into edge mode here. I'm going to select the edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and say ring it all the way around. And then this time I'm going to connect it, but I want to add more than 5. I'm going to do something a little bit denser, like a 10. And
So that can be even though.
What's that?
Because before.
Yeah, because I'm not planning on having a center line. So in this case, I'm just going 10. I just want a blank, like kind of like a lot of detail here, and I'm ambiguous as to where it's put. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and select this other section here, and I'm going to ring that, and then I also want to connect that with 10. And so all I did was I just kind of created a lot of resolution here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the soft selection again, and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to select a bunch of vertices. Yeah, this time I'm going to do them one by one. I'm going to go back a little bit here. And can anyone tell what I'm doing? Yeah, I'm kind of making that divot pattern, but I'm not selecting the whole thing. I'm just kind of doing from the center. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fall off on my soft select to kind of do the work for me. So now that I've got those selected and I like what I've done reasonably, I'm going to go into the soft select tab again, and I'm going to enable soft selection. I'm going to change the fall off because right now my fall off is too severe. So I'm going to dial that down. And I just want the fall off to kind of fill up that the seat there, the baseline of the seat. And then I'm going to hold down the W key, and I'm just going to pull that down. And there we go. We've kind of got the depression for like a routered chair. It kind of went a little bit below, and that's fine. If I wanted to, I could have changed the fall off a little bit so that it didn't go underneath. And then I could just pull that down like that. And there we go. So within a short period of time here, we've created a chair and we've given it a realistic back here with a curvature and then a divot as if it were routed out. Okay? So the next thing I want to do is, this all looks fine and we've gotten slightly advanced here and adding extra shape to it, and it looks nice. But what if we wanted to actually have the edges be more rounded? So I've told you guys about having any sort of edge that comes severely to a point like that. It's a bit of a no-no in terms of 3D, and it's just not going to look very good in anything other than a video game. So what I'm going to do here is, let's say I now want to, this was an asset and I was supposed to create it for a video game or a primitive console game, and now my art director comes and he says this thing has to go into the cinematic or the film. All right, so once I do that, I'm like, oh crap, now I have to modify this. So if I would have known this was a film asset to begin with, I probably would have planned out where all my rounded edges were going to go in the first place. But let's say I couldn't do that, and now I've just been told to do it. So I'm going to go into edge mode here. Notice I'm in soft selection, and I can see that the minute I see that kind of rainbow. I'm going to turn off the soft select. And now I want to go ahead and select all the exterior edges. So that means any edge that's on the outside of my object and not on the inside. So, and this is a little tedious, and I wish I could do this with something other than this chair. So instead of doing the entire chair, I'm just going to do like one side of it. So I'm going to select the back here. And I want to show you some selection techniques that can speed up your blanket selections if you ever have to do this. One is you can click to select one edge with the control key. And then if I hold down the shift key when I click on another one, it didn't work this time. So I did that wrong actually. If I hold down the control key and I double click on an edge away from there, it will actually fill up the edges in between, which is kind of nice. So I'll find another flat area where I can do that again. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to click on this edge here, and I'm going to come down here to the bottom and control double click, and it'll select and it'll stop right there because it doesn't know what to do, so I have to do it again. So click, there we go, and then I'm going to keep going around, and I'm just going to do this chair leg here. Oops, that's an interior edge, so that was a no-no. I don't want to. Exterior edge. Wouldn't it be great if there was a button that you could just say pick exterior edges? No such thing. Okay, and I missed one, so there we go. And I missed one here. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I want to round all these off. And so what I'm going to use to do that is a button here under Edge, under Edit Edges, and it's called Chamfer. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the chamfer settings here. And look what happens. This thing allows me to round off the edge of pretty much any edge that I have selected, and then increase the number of corners on it. So I can zoom in here, and I've told you the minimum number you need on a 0 or 1 to 90 degree arc is 3 edges, so I'm just going to do the minimum. So I got 1, 2, 3 edges on each, and I'm going to say apply. And then I'm going to go ahead and render this again. And we can see here that it's a little bit nicer, and I could certainly fix all these artifacts easily by going into polygon mode, selecting all of these, and then I can say under the smoothing groups, I can just say auto smooth at a 45-degree angle, turn this off, come back here, render this again, and now we got a nice hard edge and everything looks right. But I want you to be aware of something. When you add your edges in post like this, so in post means after the fact, so I probably should have planned these rounded corners before I ever started building the object, but I didn't do that, so I was adding them in after the fact. When you do that, I just want you to be aware that you can end up with these kind of not so clean artifacts. So see how this one is attached in a way, and then this one's got kind of a weird 5-pointed diamond quad. It's not 5-pointed, but it's a diamond quad. Same thing over here, it's got a weird diamond quad. This is maybe not quite as clean as it could be, and so it's a good idea for you guys, if you are going to build things that are rounded, to plan that out ahead of time before you actually build it out. But if you do want to round something after the fact, you do it using the chamfer. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and I want you to play around with that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've covered soft selection, we've covered the editable poly, how to merge vertices, edges, bridging, all that. So let's start to build some stuff, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and reset my scene. And the first thing I want to build is a pillow. So as with anything, there's a number of ways that you can accomplish the same thing. So the first way I'm going to build my pillow is I'm going to go with Create, Standard Primitives, and I'm going to just go ahead and do a box. And I'll make it about that big. And then I'm going to go into my construction parameters for my box here. And I'm going to add some extra edges. And that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to add another set around the base there. And then let's go ahead and turn this thing into a pillow. So I'm going to right click on it and say convert to editable poly. I'm going to then go into the vertices here, and I'm just going to scale these down. The corner here, scale them down again, and then scale them down again on the other corner. I kind of missed one there. That's okay, I can be dirty. Alright, got a pillow. And then all I got to do here to turn this thing into a pillow is go ahead and convert it with a turbo smooth, and boom, we've got a pillow. So that's one way we can box model a pillow. I'm going to show you maybe a little bit different way to make one. And this is another method for, you can kind of use this method to build almost anything. So let's go ahead and do one again. So I'm going to create, this time I'm going to build it one side at a time. So I'm going to go to create, standard primitives, and I'm going to do a plane. And I want my plane to be square, just for consistency's sake. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide my grid by hitting the G key. And this time, I kind of have half my pillow here. And the best way for me to get the shape of a pillow on here is first to convert it to an editable poly. And then I'm going to go into Vertex Mode here. And I'm just going to select the center vertex, and I'm going to go into Soft Select. And let's say I want my pillow to just basically be about that shape. And I can just go in here and boom, just pull that up. And then if I want to duplicate this, all I have to do is select the object. So I'm going to go to the top of the stack at the Editable Poly. And now I'm going to go ahead and mirror my object. And I always click on copy, and then I just click this until I see what I want, which in this case is Z. I'm going to say OK. And I have something that kind of looks like two halves of a ravioli. And that's basically all a pillow is anyway. So I'm going to select these guys, and I have one selected. And with the Editable Poly, it kind of works similar to the line tool. You can always attach other polygon objects to the one you have selected. And you do that by selecting the object. And then right over here under Edit Geometry, we have the Attach mode. And I can attach that bottom section of the pillow. Now that I have those two attached to each other, I can get out of Attach mode. And now I can start welding the vertices. So I can go in here to Vertex Mode. And if I go into the orthographic viewport, I could just go ahead and select all the way across here. And I could go ahead and weld these using the weld threshold. And that would weld them together pretty good. But I want to show you another way where maybe I'm going to do some of these with the target weld. And the reason for that is so that I can have a little variation in how my pillow is actually made. So now I'm going to go into target weld here. And I'm going to, this one's so close together I can't even see what it's doing. So for this one, I'm going to use the regular old weld. So I'm going to say weld, okay. And then for the one next to it, I'm going to use the target weld, because what I want to do is, for some of these I want to move them up. And for some of them I'm going to move it down. And what that's going to do is it's just going to give my pillow a little variation. And then I'm not always going to do them the same way. So this one I'm going to pull down. This one I'm going to go up. And then same thing here, down. I get out of that stupid realistic viewport because I hate that. And then what I want to do here is I want to make sure, I think that some of these vertices here on the corners didn't get welded. So I'm going to select those at the very end and make sure they did. So I'm going to select them all by marquee dragging around them. That ensures that I have all those vertices selected. And then I'm going to go to weld with the threshold, and I'm going to say OK. And there we go, we got my pillow. Similar to this one, except for this one's got a little bit of undulation going around it, and it's not so symmetrical. And now all I have to do is the same thing. I'm going to go into my Editable Poly, and I'm going to go into my Turbo Smooth modifier. And there we go, I Turbo Smooth it down, and we got a nice pillow. Alright, so under my Turbo Smooth here, I kind of have some of these corners that got a little collapse. So if I increase the iterations by one more time here, and then if you ever want to what's called bake a Turbo Smooth, so let's say I want to commit this geometry, right? So I want to keep that geometry. I don't want to be able to undo it. You can actually bake the Turbo Smooth down. And you can do that by right-clicking over here in the modifier stack and just say collapse all. Always say hold yes. What that does is it'll hold the changes into the buffer, so if you make a mistake you can get it back. And then I just say OK. At that point I have my pillow done. I've got the extra vertices. I do see here at the corners I've got these verts that look like they're a little tweaked out, and I'm going to leave those alone for now. If I was doing this for real, I'd fix them, so why don't I just fix them? So I'm going to pull these guys in a little bit. And then let's say this is a decorative pillow, right? And decorative pillows always have something on them called piping. And here I am, I'm modifying this in the perspective viewport. And I totally thought I could wing this, but Max got the better of me this time. Sweet. And now it's not letting me minimize my viewport. Pause. Alright, sorry about that. I kind of got stuck in a loop where I was actually in an editable mesh, because that's what Max turns your mesh into after you bake it. And it just wouldn't let me minimize my viewport. And so that was causing me problems. And so now I also have these two verts here that somehow did not get welded. And so I'm going to go ahead and weld those. And then I'm going to pull this one in a little bit. Okay, now that I have my pillow here and I've got it set up the way I want it, I want to very quickly just put some piping around it, which is that little tube of fabric that runs all the way around on nice decorative pillows. So I'm going to select one of these edges, and then I'm going to say loop, and it's going to stop short. That's okay. I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to select another edge, and I'm going to say loop. It's going to ring around. It's going to stop at the corner again because it hits a point where it lacks the threshold to keep going. So I'm going to select another edge, and I'm going to say loop again, and loop, and there we go. All right, now that I've looped my edge almost all the way around, I just got one more to do here. I'm going to select one and say loop. Now what I can do is I can go into the Edit Edges tool for the edges, and under Edit Edges I have here Create Shape from Selection. If I click that button, what it's going to do is it's going to create a line from that selection, and then with that line I'm actually going to be able to extrude another shape along, which is going to be a little circle. So always, if you're going to do this, make sure that you have linear clicked instead of smooth. If you do smooth, what happens is it puts Bezier handles into it, and it's going to mess it up. In this case, it's always pretty much better to go with linear, so I'm going to say OK. Now we have a new line here that I'm going to use to create my piping. So I'm going to go to the top of the chain here. I'm going to deselect my object, select my curve here. See how it's got that nice kind of undulation there where it's not exactly perfect? And that's because I made this using the plane. I was able to get that effect. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say hide unselected. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a shape to extrude along that path. So I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to do a shape, and I want to do a circle. I'm going to just come in here and create a small little circle, say OK. And then now I can select my path. I'm going to move my circle down just to coincide with the path a little bit, keep my mind straight. So I'm going to select my path, and I'm going to go into Create, Geometry, Compound Objects, Loft, and then I'm going to say Get Shape. And it's not going to let me do this because this happened last time. I believe my line got slightly screwed up when I made it. So I'm going to find out what happened. So I'm going to go into my editable spline, and I think what happens is it ends up creating an extra vertex here. And actually what I think happened is that we ended up with vertices here that didn't get welded, just like that other one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit it with a fire hose. I'm just going to select all three of those. I'm going to dial up the threshold and say weld. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Weld, weld, and weld. Alright. I believe that's going to solve my problem now. So I'm going to go, I got my path selected. I'm going to go back into the Create, Geometry, Compound Objects, Loft. I'm going to click on it. Now, see it's valid shape, so I'm going to say Get Shape, and I'm going to click on my little circle and check it out. If I say right click and say Unhide All, boom, we've got a pillow with piping. Awesome. So I'm going to go in here under the piping, and I'm going to go into my loft. And under the skin parameters, this is definitely way too dense. I want to dial the skin parameters down to optimize. So I'm going to dial not in shape steps. I want to do it there. I'll do like a 2, but in past steps, I definitely want to cut that down to the minimum. And there we go. We got our pillow. Another cool feature that I haven't shown you guys yet in Max is the Layers panel. The Layers panel allows you to organize objects and keep track of them without having to group them. So I'm going to go over here and click on the Layers panel. And what this allows me to do is currently I have a default layer which has all the objects in my scene. But watch what happens if I select the pillow and the piping and I click on this icon here for Create New Layer with the, and Add Contained Objects. It's going to add those, and now I can hide them all as one. I can freeze them, which makes them non-editable. I can do all sorts of rendering properties, which doesn't really help us in this class. And then I can rename the layer. So if I wanted to double click on this layer and just call it Deco Pillow _01, there we go. And if it'll even let you select the objects. So if you go in here and you say Loft and you say Select, I can select those individually and move them around. And you can also select them regularly throughout the scene. So it's just a nice way for you to organize your scene. And I can call this Box Pillow. Say OK. And now if I ever want to go in here, I just go into the Layers panel. And I can just hide those guys without having to do the Show One Hide stuff. All right, so I'm going to turn my grid back on. Let's build something else for our rooms here. Let's build a door. And we're going to do the standard 6-panel door. So I'm going to go over here to Google. I'm going to close this off. And I want to go to Google Images. And I'm just going to type 6-panel door. Okay. And then I click on Images. And I'm really just looking for a quick reference here for my door. So I want to teach you guys how to count off the number of edges to build an object. So like I said, you need an edge wherever there's a detail, right? So in this 6-panel door, we have, on the exterior, we have detail 1, which is the perimeter of the door. So we have 1. We're going to do them first laterally, so just across, and then we'll do them vertically. So laterally across, I've got 1 edge here for the edge of the door. I got an edge here for the beginning of the first set of panels. I got an edge here for the second part of the second set of panels. I got an edge here, an edge here, and an edge here. So that comes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 laterally. Now vertically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So that is an 8 by 6. So I'm going to go ahead and go into 3ds Max. And I'm going to go ahead and do this in the front viewport. And I'm going to create a standard primitive box. And for some reason it is transparent. Strange. Let me reset the scene. So I'm going to go in here and say create standard primitives. I'm going to do a box. That was weird. That's Max for you sometimes. So I'm going to create a door here. and then I'm going to make it about door depth. And I'm going to hit the J key to hide my bounding box. I'm going to hit the F4 key to do edged faces. And then I want to add the number of edges I need to define those panels. So I said it was 6 laterally and 8 vertically. So because I still have the construction history of my box, it's going to be easy for me to insert the number of edges here. So I'm going to go 7, and I want you guys to watch something. So I said 8, but I'm only typing 7. And the reason for that is because when Max has the construction history on the box, it doesn't count the first edge. So sometimes what you have to do is just, I always count the edges after I make them just to make sure. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's good. Notice it's 7, but it's actually 8. Same thing is going to be in width. So if I want 6 edges, I'm going to actually have 5, and then I can count that to confirm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm ready to start modeling it. So I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to say Convert to Editable Poly. I'm going to go into Vertex Mode, and what I want to do is I just want to start organizing these panels the way they are in my illustration. So we have the perimeter edge here, which is pretty much uniform around the top and sides, but then it gets a little bigger on the bottom. So that's the first detail I'm going to set up here. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab and pull these. So I'm marquee dragging around all these verts, and I'm going to kind of pull them up to the top, and then I want to define on the side. I want that to be about the same width all the way around, so I'm going to do the same thing here. Pull these over, okay? And then that height, that is actually pretty good and pretty consistent with that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone. So then I'm going to come in here, and my top set of panels on this door are relatively square. It is square. So I'm going to do those first. So I'm going to grab these verts here. I'm going to pull those up until I have a nice square there. And then I have kind of even spacing between these two sections, and it's about the same as here for this and this. So I'm going to grab these guys and just scale those in until my width is about the same as the perimeter. And then this one I'm just going to pull up because it was about the same width as this perimeter line. And then now I have the remaining, which is just my rectangles for my long panels, which are these guys in here. And there's a little bit of a bigger gap there in the center. So I'm going to let that be. And I can go ahead and hit my R key to kind of scale that down. And that actually looks pretty close to what that door looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now that I have all my edges in the right place, I go and pop into my perspective viewport. And we can see here that it's already starting to look like that door. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go into my polygon mode here, and I'm going to select all those panels there for the faces, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to extrude those guys. So I'm going to click on the extrude button. Oops. And I love the history because that's not what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to bevel them. So I'm going to go into bevel mode, and I want to recess these guys. I'm going to recess them by a -2. The cool thing about this is I can type in a very precise value, and I'll show you where that'll come in handy here in a sec. So I'm doing a 3 there, -3. And then I'm going to go ahead and taper this in a little bit, like so. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now what I want to do is I want to bevel that right back up. So I'm going to select those polygons again, and I'm going to bevel them. And remember it was -3, so I think if I type 6, that's not right. I think 0 will do it. Nope. My math is all messed up. It's 3. So it's -3 and now it's +3. And that basically remains flush with the door there. And so now my inset is matching my outset. And I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. You might say to yourself, that's a pretty cool door, right? And you'd be right. It's a fairly cool door. But that's kind of a game res door because it's only got a hard edge wherever you have an edge. And for film, that's not gonna render very well, right? So if this was for a cutaway sequence or a film asset, even a next-gen game asset, we would go ahead and round the edges on everything. So why don't we go ahead and do that? I'm going to go ahead and select my edges here. I'm going to say loop. I'm going to select another edge. Oops. Control key. I'm going to come down here, control double click. Control double click. It's going to select all the edges in between. Control double click. Selects all the edges. And then I want to go ahead and select all these edges. Oops. Actually, I'm going to select any of these guys in here. And there may be an easier way for me to do this. I'm going to go into my orthographic viewport, hold down Control, and I'm selecting that interior. And if I hold down the Alt key, look what I can do. I can deselect the edges I don't want. So this is another key for orthographic viewport. So I'm going to select all these guys, and then I'm going to Alt select to get rid of the edges I don't want. And I'm going to hit the Q key to make sure I don't accidentally move something. So marquee drag again. Alt key to deselect. I'm going to deselect all the edges I don't want. And so what I should be left with here is only the exterior edges of my door. And I just want to confirm that. I always check it out. Sometimes I'll hit the F3 key to go to wireframe and make sure that I don't have any extra edges selected. In this case I do. I have some of the back faces on this door selected, so I'm totally glad I did that because I don't want those selected either. Even though I'm about to delete those, it's okay. I just want to get rid of those, so I'm going to Alt click to deselect those. And then now I'm going to go ahead and chamfer the edges on my door here. So I'm in edge mode. I'm going to go over here to chamfer, and I'm going to go ahead and add 2 edges. And then I don't want them to be quite that rounded, so I'm going to do something like a 0.2. Type that in. Go ahead and accept the changes. And there we go. Now we've got something. Render that out. Ooh, that's pretty. All right, so now what we're going to do here is I'm going to go and delete the back half of the door because I want this to be on both sides. So I'm going to come over here in my ortho. I'm going to go into poly mode. I'm going to select all of those poly faces on the back side of the door. Confirm in perspective view that I'm not selecting any on my chamfered edge. Confirmed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the top of the chain here, Editable Poly. I don't want edge mode, so I'm going to select my object. I want to mirror it. I'm going to make a copy, and I can't see which way it's going from this perspective, so I'm going to take a stab in the dark, and I don't think that's right. So I'm going to undo, select this guy, mirror, I'll say a copy, and it looks like Y is the culprit. And now I'm going to go ahead and just move this guy off. Make it about door width. Make sure that those inside panels don't intersect each other though. Alright, and then now what I can do is I can select my front panel on my door, say attach, select the back panel, then I can go into border mode, and I can select the border edges on both of these objects, and then I can go ahead and bridge them, and bingo bango boom, I've got a really nice door with completely rounded edges, and is a nice little asset, whoops, for my scene. Alright, cool. Let's see how we're doing on time. That's it. Alright, so I wanted to do a couch, and what I'm going to do is we'll do a couch next time. So next lecture we're going to do like soft stuff like couches, curtains, and anything that's like more advanced than this. So what you're going to do now is you know how to build the hard objects, right? You're going to do your 6-panel door or whatever door equivalent. You're going to model all your doorknobs, all your trim. You're going to build all your desk objects, all your window frames, all that kind of stuff. And so next week, all you should have left is just soft objects like furniture. So if you have a soft furniture, couch, leave those, or just anything you're not quite sure how to build. What I usually do is I go around and ask people what they're trying to build still, and then I'll just build it in class in front of you guys and tape record it. All right? Cool. Good luck to everyone. Peace out.